Welcome to the podcast, The Storyteller, in which we talk to South Africans who have a special story to tell. Victim support rooms are an initiative of the South African Police Service. They are manned by volunteers from the community who offer emergency support to victims in the aftermath of a crime. They can then refer them to professional counsellors. Hettie Glass was a victim support volunteer for over 10 years.
What it is, I think our lifestyle nowadays, everybody wants everything fast and people haven't got time to listen. And often people just need somebody to talk to. And often they don't need counseling as such. They just want somebody to listen and help them trying to figure out their problems. And so we found actually that about 60 or 70% of our cases were actually people that had problems in the house, home problems, sort of domestic
Problems.
violence and that sort of thing, or domestic problems, or problems with their children or something. And they just want somebody to listen. And the idea is that we don't give advice, not at all. We just let them talk and then figure it out themselves in some way. And you just work with them like that.
So you're just an ear.
Yes, that's actually, it's of course difficult. I'm a talker, so it's sometimes difficult, but I make really a point of just encouraging them to talk. And I say to them they can say anything and it's all private. I don't talk to anybody else about it. And that is very important, that it's confidential completely.
So in the early days, when you began, what did you find the most difficult?
Anything to do with drugs, I found extremely difficult because you didn't always know if the person was on drugs. It's strange. I mean, we know ways of seeing it, but you're not always so sure. Drugs was the only one thing that I always found very difficult. Yes, dealing with that.
So was it their behavior that you couldn't assess?
And actually, we had a rule that anybody that's intoxicated or drugged, the police mustn't refer to us. But the police couldn't always know either. But what I found also very difficult is mothers that come and talk about their children on drugs and they don't know what to do. And they say, what have I done wrong? And that I found very difficult as well. So you refer them to all the different drug agencies there then, and you hope they go ahead with it.
Was this a common problem in the community that you worked in?
Yes, but they didn't all come to the police. I think they were scared the police would pick up on the drug. So it was always very confidential. A mother would come and then talk about that and said, this child is making hell at home and she doesn't know what to do anymore. But I always said it was confidential. So she could then open up and she knew I wouldn't go to the police and say, her son is on drugs, go and arrest him or something like that. That wouldn't happen at all.
The victim support rooms were set up mainly to assist the victims of domestic abuse, and Hettie saw her fair share of people in this situation.
You'd have domestic violence cases, and then you suggest to the person, it's usually a woman, to get a protection order against her spouse, husband, boyfriend, or what it is. But if she doesn't use it, if you have a weapon and you never use it, so some women would have a protection order, but they don't phone the police when something happens, then it's worthless, and that is really a very big problem. I can talk a lot about that because we had lots of those cases.
Of domestic violence.
Yeah. The woman just feels it might be also if the spouse or friend or what gets arrested, then she has no emotional support, perhaps financial support. she feels then she's in a worse situation. It's better that he's at home.
Where does your level of frustration lie in doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, if you have spent many hours with somebody, and like for protection orders, for example, and so on, and in the end they decide they're not going to do that, and within a few months they're going to be back and say the guy smashed my, hit me again. Look at my blue marks, and then you want to say, "But I told you 2 months ago, I told you must do something about it." But we are all like that at times. We think we plan to do this and that, and then in the end we never do it. I mean, that's very human to do, and it's a bit frustrating if you spend a lot of time with that person and try to get them so far to realize they should do this or that. Yeah, that is the frustration of it, but it's part of your work, actually. Your voluntary work.
And Hettie, did you come across other kinds of cases besides domestic violence?
Yeah, I dealt with a few rape cases, not so many. Um, when somebody died in the house, and the people really needed somebody just to. It's always an awkward time, of course, and you go then to the house, and suicide. I had quite a few, and that is very scary. And it's usually younger people, younger men. The few that I dealt with, it was really terrible. And then children, problem with children, sexual abuse, but we usually immediately referred that to a special police group that comes out with children. I followed also a course on how to help men to be less violent in their relationship to women. And that was a very interesting course, and I helped quite a few men help with that, to deal with that, how to act.
Can you give an example of somebody and how you help them?
In our society, men always feel they have to be in charge. What they say, everybody must listen to them. Then they become very abusive towards the family, often in their relationships. Now, one case I had was a young man, and he was in a relationship with another lady, and he felt he needed help. And I said to him, I just finished a course on it, and I'm not sure that I can help him because I have no experience further with this. So he says, and I recommended him to go to Hope House and some other, and then he wasn't successful there. And he came back to me and he said, "Please, can you help me?" So I said to him, "All right, I'm going to use you as a guinea pig." And I used the notes we got, and I made copies for him, and we went through all the phases, how to control yourself when you get cross, when you get mad at somebody else, and you just want to, be violent almost, and so on. And so I had lots of sessions with him that I actually wasn't really officially allowed to because I wasn't properly trained for it. But it had a very good result, and he was very thankful in the end. So that it was a good example that, you must just be honest with the person and say, I'm not sure that we can manage it, but let's try. And then they're much more open, and we could go really through quite a few things that he struggled with, and it really helped him a lot.
Now, when you were called out to scenes,
Yeah,
um, you've mentioned that you've been called out to quite dramatic
very.
uh, cases. Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah. I must just make sure that nobody will know who it was or what. I'm thinking of specifically one case. It was a young man. I think he was in his 20s and so on, and he hung himself. And his father, I don't know why the police called me while he was still hanging there. It was really horrible. And his father just wanted to hold him the whole time, and I had to really speak to him and say, no, you leave him now, let's come and talk. And I took him aside. And it was really very hard. And I sort of thought to myself, that's actually, I didn't want any other counselor to do this kind of thing, because it was really a hard thing. It was really terrible.
Whilst Hettie dealt with extreme cases of violence, she also realized that trauma has many faces, and to never underestimate how different individuals react.
A girl that came to me, I think she was 16, 18 years old, and she cried her head off. The police didn't know what to do with her and called me in. And so in the end, what it was, she walked in a park and she had a bag on her back, and somebody came and took her diary. And she was just so upset. She couldn't talk to anybody. So it doesn't matter what it is. It can be something small that upsets a person so enormously. So any trauma is trauma. And you mustn't say, oh, the one is worse than the other. It is not. For that person, it's very bad. And it doesn't matter what it is.
So why was that traumatic for her?
Because her diary, it was to me very interesting. I sat there and listened, and when she in the end started talking, and she used her diary to put all her anxiety, to write it all down, and nobody was allowed to touch it, and it was just for her. And somebody came and took it, and it was to her as if somebody killed her almost, because they took all her private things that was in the diary.
Did you ever feel that it was thankless, or did you get some sort of gratification out of what you were doing?
Your gratification comes when you have been busy with you usually are busy for an hour with a person. That is usually what we say. We time it in some ways. And then you phone the person back in a week's time, or when it suits you, or what it is. You phone the person back. You never use your private phone, by the way. We used always police phones. And then when the person says, oh, that was very helpful, and that is your thank you get. And I got that very often. So that let me feel what I was doing was the right thing. And not always. Sometimes they say, no, I'm still struggling, and this and that. And then you say, shouldn't you go to so and so, or get help there and there. And then you really absolutely try and refer the case to somebody else.
Hettie, have you ever actually suffered from almost secondary abuse, trauma? That the job itself is quite traumatic, and it affects you. Have you actually ever noticed that?
Yes. I have a husband that is very, he's a very quiet person. He's a scientist sort of thing. And if I came
This is your
home,
own
my
husband
own
you're talking
husband, yeah.
about. Yes.
I have a husband, as if I have more. Yeah, sorry. I would come home and then be so feel very down or something like that. And I'll tell him a little bit about it, but I know he will not talk about it. And I don't mention names, and I just say this, and this has happened, and so on. And that just relieves me, because what we also do in our monthly meeting, we always, if somebody felt traumatized about a case, then we allow them to tell us without detail, and just sort of that we can get some counseling actually from one another, to help us through if it's something was very hard.
Mm.
So I'm just very lucky that and also when I get home, I think, oh, am I not? I'm so thankful that I live like I do. If you see some people really struggling so much.
Inquire at your local police station to see if they have a victim support room. Or you can offer your own services as a victim support volunteer to the South African Police Service. A special thanks to Freesound. This podcast was brought to you by Digital Storyteller.